Hello guys, welcome again to the channel. Today I want to share with you my opinion about this recent news. For some time I wanted to talk about this particular subject, but somehow I delayed doing it. But I think it is very relevant in the context of the current conflict in Ukraine. So a lot of people don't know the story or the history of Ukraine, how it became to be the state it is right now, from their far historical origins until the state where we have this current situation happening right now. And it is very interesting, as we will see. So I did some research about this, and let's take a look first, as this story in particular is what triggered my desire to mention this information. This comes from Radio Sputnik website, and they say that a member of the Council of the State Administration of Zaporizhia called for the renaming of Ukraine into UGIL, the Ukrainian state of Ivano-Frankivsk and Lvov. This is translated from Russian to English, so bear in mind that some things might not be completely making sense because of the rough translation. And they are making these allegations. They say he noted that people from Lvov, Ivano-Frankivsk region hold leading positions in power structures. As practice has shown, the Kiev regime did not trust and does not trust the local population. Therefore, people from the western Ukrainian regions are brought to the central and southeastern regions to keep us. So all this will make sense in a moment, but the main thing is how they are mentioning these particular regions. Lvov and Ivano-Frankivsk region. So all starts with how the Ukrainian state came to be, and why are they mentioning these regions, Ivano-Frankivsk and Lvov, the regions of the west of Ukraine. So let's start first with the Ukrainian language, because this kind of will help people understand how all this came to be. Originally, Ukrainian language was called Ruthenian, and we will see in a moment why it was called Ruthenian, because Ruthenia was a section in Europe, very old section of Europe, that included a portion of what we now call Eastern Europe, with some states like Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and parts of Poland. I think portions of Hungary, and maybe some portions of current Romania, and the regions of western Ukraine that are precisely mentioned in this article, that are Lvov and Ivano-Frankivsk, and a little bit more to the north, but mainly these two regions where the Ukrainian language, that so-called Ukrainian language, came to be. But originally this language was called Ruthenian, not Ukrainian. So this is more like a political name than the actual name. So this is kind of you can call it is like an impersonation. This language came to be, or they wanted to represent the whole of Ukraine, but actually it doesn't represent the whole of Ukraine, as we will see from historical background. What is now called Ukrainian language or Ruthenian language is a descendant from the colloquial language used in the Kievan Rus. the Kievan Rus, if you know, is the origin of the Russian state, or the Russian people, the Russian ethnic population. That's where they started, in the Kievan Rus. And after the Kievan Rus, the characteristics that distinguish Ruthenian language from its sister languages emerge. I'm going to use Ruthenian language to make it clear that this is not the real Ukrainian language. So where was the Kievan Rus? So this is the approximate location of the Kievan Rus, and it was the center of the Kievan Rus was precisely in Kiev. If you can see here in the part of the map, it was Kiev, and all these regions to the north, including parts of some Baltic states, including what is now Belarus, and other parts here in Russia. So this is what was called the Kievan Rus. And in this portion, in the southwest, it is the region that is called Galicia. So this was in the border of what is now Poland and Hungary, you know. But before, it was the Ruthenian, and Ruthenia included all these regions here of Poland, Hungary, maybe regions here, Bulgaria, Romania, some portion of this. All of this was Ruthenia. So all this region here in the west part, it was Ruthenia. And so they didn't live at the same time, these both of these regions. So bear that in mind. So that was the Kievan Rus. And then let's take a look at this information. This comes from Illinois Library, and they mention the Ukrainian language traces, or the Ruthenian language traces its origin to the Old East Slavic language of the ancient state of Kievan Rus. So it is confirming the information we had with the Britannica Encyclopedia. And they say only in western Ukraine is the Ukrainian language prevalent. So this is historical information before the current political situation that influenced Ukraine for the last at least 20 years. So this is what it was, the origins of the Ruthenian language. And now let's pay attention to this. This information that we have here comes, it was let's say prepared with the information from 2009 from the Kiev National Linguistic University and 2001 Ukrainian census. So this information is not from the last previous to the last 10 years. So from 2009 to 2022, so this is about 13 years ago roughly. And the census was in 2001, so that's roughly 20 years old, 21 years old. So bear that in mind, that this was the ethnic and linguistic composition of Ukraine at the time. So pay attention especially to the regions in the west. The regions in the west is where it is the Galician dialect of Ukrainian. So pay attention to this, you know. This is where Ukrainian is prevalent, or Ruthenian language is prevalent. This is what is the birthplace of the Ruthenian language, and including another regions that are outside of the scope of Ukraine. And they have all other dialects here. For example, all these dialects that are shown here in orange, which is a big portion of the west and south or northwest, northeast, central parts of Ukraine. So this region here is what is Kiev. So Kiev, as you can see with the red color, is predominantly Russian. And this region that is shown in orange is what they call this Surgic dialect, which is actually a mix of Russian and Ruthenian language. So this is the prevalent language in this region. So it's not completely Russian, it's not completely Ukrainian, it's some kind of mix, and with this mix it became known as Surgic. And they have another one that is called Rusin, which is in this region of the Transcarpathian. The Transcarpathian region is what it used to be Hungary. So I'm just guessing because I did not research this part. I think Rusin language will be a mix of Ruthenian language and Hungarian language. And then they have this region in the south of the Transcarpathian, where they usually speak more Hungarian. So probably is a mix of Hungarian and another thing that they call here Magyar. There are regions here that they speak Polish, and that's what is relevant for this. The rest, as you can see, is predominantly Russian, with small pockets of other languages. In the south, in the Crimea, is predominantly Russian, with small regions where they speak Crimean Tatar, which is a very old language. So this is what it was, and as this is important in the context of what I am trying to say. This is the current, let's say, modern state of Ukraine, and these regions in the west are exactly what they are mentioning here: the regions of Lvov, Ivano-Frankivsk, mostly, maybe a little bit of Volyn, and what they call here the Zakarpattia, which is the Transcarpathian region. So this is the regions, maybe a little bit of Ternopil, but not so much, but mostly this part is where is predominant the Ruthenian language. No? And I'm going to tell you a story. I was in Ukraine in 2013, right before the problems with the coup for the president of the time, at the time of Ukraine came to be. So it was the last time that I saw Ukraine before the current political situation that we have now. And I was visiting a friend or some friends who live in the area of Kharkiv or Kharkov, and they mentioned a story where they visited Lvov, the city of Lvov, and they say, and pay attention to this, this was before the war, before all the conflicts and everything. No, it was peacetime, it was normal time. And they mentioned that they went to visit the city of Lvov, and they say they were targeted. People there were very aggressive with them because they were speaking Russian. So this was like a general trend. People in the area of Lvov were very aggressive. You were going to visit, you were like a tourist, and you were, visiting your country, and they were very aggressive with them. They say they were targeted. People were very rude with them just because they were speaking Russian language. So this is where all this hate comes from this region in the west. They don't like Ukrainians because, as you were able to see in the map, most of Ukraine is a mix of Russian and Ukrainian, but predominantly is Russian. Some of these people speak both Russian and Ukrainian. People in this region speak mostly Russian, but if you pay attention to what you see, the shape of the map, probably about 20 to 25% of the country speaks only Ruthenian language. So this is what happened. And well, this map I will show it later. So this is another map This was the composition of Ukraine historically. Ukraine, what we now call Ukraine, was this region here in 1654. This region here was added in 1654 to 1917, so this is the period until the First World War. So pay attention to this. These are the regions where mostly the mix between Russian and Ukrainian was spoken. So this was Ukraine. Then came this in 1922, all this section here. So if you consider the green area, the yellow and the pink, this is what was the Ukrainian state during the Bolshevik Revolution. So this is what was most of Ukraine during all this time. And later, probably almost the last part of the country that was added was this region here. This is the region of Galicia that we were just discussing, with Lvov in this part, Ivano-Frankivsk in this region here, and in the left, far left, is Transcarpathian, and in this other region is what it was part of the Bukovina province that later became detached from Ukraine, from Romania. Historically, this part of Bukovina was part of Romania, but during the war they gave it to the state of Ukraine, and the region of Crimea was added in 1954. So that was the latest portion added historically to Ukraine. So this is the modern state of Ukraine. Yes, you can see the regions here. So historically, the people of Ukraine were focusing on this, on the right part of the map. And then we see this part is another map, where they have these borders that were what it was the Soviet state. It was the borders of the Soviet state. If you see here this line with the pink, it was approximately what it was from 1917 to 1921. This was what was considered Ukraine. All of these, including parts of Russia that are currently not part of Ukraine. So all these regions is the south part of Russia with the Kerch Strait here. So all the Sea of Azov and all the adjacent territories were part of historical Ukraine. And this didn't include the West, absolutely didn't include the West. And then came to be the war, and during 1939 this was a Polish territory that was given to Ukraine. This was before the Second World War. And pay attention, this is exactly what we were discussing, is the West. So this is the last part of the country that was added to what we now can consider modern Ukraine. There are some territories in the south, like we were saying, this west part of the Bessarabia region. Bessarabia, Bukovina, this region here is Bessarabia together with the south, it's called Bessarabia. This is Bukovina region. I just recently made a video about this part, about the Bessarabia and Bukovina regions of the Romanian state. And pay attention to these states. For example, this part here that says Ukrainian lost territories given to Russia in 1924 and given to Moldova in 1940. This is it will be funny if it was not a tragedy, but exactly this portion here, this sliver of land that they gave to Moldova, is what is now called Transnistria. And that is what is now causing all these problems for Moldova, for Romania. So it was like a curse to get these territories, honestly. The majority of the peoples here are speaking or speaking either Romanian, Russian, and Ukrainian, but mostly ethnically the people here in this area, I think in the article that we mentioned yesterday, 60% of the people are ethnically Ukrainian or Russian. So I don't know what they were thinking they were going to gain from this territory, but anyway, they got it, and now they probably don't even want to have anything to do with them. So that's the story here, and my general opinion is that is very interesting how a state that had its own identity, the identity of Ukraine was stolen. In my opinion, it was impersonating these regions in the West, decided that their language, which was the Ruthenian language, was going to be called Ukrainian, and they wanted to sell the idea that the national identity of the whole of Ukraine was the identity of the Ruthenian people, which have their own identity, but they don't represent the whole identity of the entirety of Ukraine. So I don't know all the details of the story. This story spans hundreds of years, but it's very interesting how current Ukrainians identify themselves with the West instead of what is the majority of the country. It's like if somehow United States were to include the southern part of Mexico, a state of Mexico, and then everyone in the US after that decided, oh, we are Mexicans, and started speaking Spanish because they say, oh, this is our true identity, we're really Mexicans to the bone, and now we should all speak Spanish and say change the name of our country to this, and our language is actually, even if we're speaking Spanish, we should call it American. So this is what happened here. Really, this is what happened here. This Ruthenian language, it was renamed political move, so it's now called Ukrainian language. And the power structure shifted from the West, and like they mentioned here in this article that we read at the start, the influence came from the West. These ultra-right nationalist people that are Nazi collaborators that were working with the Nazis during the World War II, which massacred hundreds of thousands of people that were from Poland, Russia, Ukrainian themselves, Jews, Romanians, Gypsies. They killed hundreds of thousands of people during the Second World War. They were notorious for their cruelty. Even Nazis, Germany, kind of were a little bit surprised of the cruelty of the guys in this region, and this is the Galicia region. So then how did Galicia region become the identity of the whole of Ukraine? I cannot explain it, but that is what happened. That's why the entirety or most of Ukraine rejected what happened in 2014 when they threw away, with the government of Viktor Yanukovych. They did a coup to his government, so that's why it was not welcome, because they don't feel they are represented. But all these people, they don't feel represented, but somehow the policies of the government after 2014 made it mandatory that all schools were teaching only Ukrainian. Russian was, declared illegal. Basically, all documents were to be changed to Ukrainian. Students were teaching in Ukrainian, learning in Ukrainian. All universities were teaching in Ukrainian, where before it was like an option. You could learn in Ukrainian or in Russian, and now they withdrew that opportunity, and they deprive people of the opportunity to teach their children in Russian language. So that's why this is all this violence, and it was not only Russian language. The people in the Transcarpathian, they were also forced to speak Ukrainian, where they mostly speak Hungarian. There are some people here in this region where they speak Romanian. They were also forced to speak Ukrainian or Ruthenian language, because really this is what it is. A Ruthenian language is a foreign language to Ukraine. If we consider this, it has been less than 100 years that this was part of Ukraine, and these people hate Ukrainians. They don't see themselves as Ukrainians. They want to impose their culture on all Ukrainians and make it the dominant culture, the dominant language, and everything else. And that's why we have these problems now. So this is based on history. But let me know what you think about it. This is my opinion based on whatever documents I was able to find. I think this is accurate as far as I'm concerned. Let me know what you think, and as always, I ask you to please leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video in social media. I hope to see you again very soon, and thank you for watching.